Thanks for joining us. It's been a very busy day in Parliament today, with the Majority Leader confirming that the 2023 budget will be presented on the 15th of November this year. While we are looking forward to, the statement that government will present, there's equally some debates happening on the floor right now, which has got to do with that major occurrence that many in 8 districts across the country have been speaking about, and that's the Akosombo Dam Spillage. It's affected many lives, displaced over 20,000 people, as we're being told. And we know that today the Energy Minister has been presenting government's plan before the House today and detailing what the next steps might be. While the MPs in the affected areas and also the House as a whole has been deliberating on government's approach towards dealing with this crisis. On the floor now, some MPs contributing to that debate. We can listen into what's happening.
I agree that the VRA has an emergency preparedness plan. But, Mr. Speaker, it is one thing having the emergency, the EPP, and it is another thing implementing the EPP effectively to ensure that the effect of these activities is minimal on the people that we are today talking about. I live with VRA people in Akosombo, and I'm proud of what VRA has been doing over the years. I said earlier on, last time, that VRA is one of the strategic institutions that have been effectively managed by Ghanaians all these years. VRA has done spillages over the years. What is special about this year's spillage that has resulted in all these problems that we are experiencing? Mr. Speaker, the Deputy Minister for Energy mentioned that the VRA sent information to the district assemblies
Seem to be having some challenges there in terms of the network connection to the floor of Parliament. We'll resume that engagement for you shortly, where some of the MPs have been commenting on the plans announced by government to deal with the effects of the spillage of the dam. So far, 20 million Ghana cedis, we understand the Volta River Authority has given to the National Disaster Management Authority to deal with the effects of the spillage. We'll definitely be getting you updates on that shortly, and crossing you back to the House, where a number of reactions are greeting this information that we're receiving from the Energy Minister on that. But it's been a busy day, as I was pointing out, with the Majority Leader, Minister Bonsu, confirming this afternoon to journalists that the 2023 budget statement will be presented in the House, but that will be done on the 15th of November this year. He's been explaining more.
A parliament requires, as according to the IPU, a minimum of 8 weeks to interrogate the budget before coming up with the appropriations bill. Unfortunately, as I've indicated, we have barely 6 weeks. In fact, it's for that reason that your PFMA, your Public Financial Management Act, prescribes that the last date for submitting the budget is November 15th. And that's the reason why it's coming on the 15th, Wednesday, the 15th of November. Usually the budgets are read on Thursdays. So initially we were thinking that it should hold on 16th. That is subject to the agreement of all of us. We had agreed that it could be submitted on the 16th, just to be in conformity with the dates of presentation. But because we have very limited time, and because of the fact also that the 16th incidentally happens to be the date for the state funeral of the former First Lady, we thought it would be better to just be congruent with the provisions of the Act and bring it forward to the 15th, which is a Wednesday. So next week, Wednesday, we're going to have it.
Well, the minority also has the expectation ahead of the 2024 budget statement, with the minority leader, Dr. Kaysel Atuforson, indicating that they will frustrate the government's economic plan if it does not reflect on how they intend to deal with the challenges Ghanaians are facing.
Next week will be the beginning of the budget consideration. We expect the minister responsible for finance to be here. I'm not too sure whether it's 15th or 16th. It's for the majority leader to inform us based on the government decision on the date that they will present the budget. But we expect from the minority side that this budget will be a budget that will address the concerns of the ordinary Ghanaian and businesses. We are very concerned about the economic condition, and we'll do whatever it takes to assist the government to help restore the difficulties we are going through. We believe that this is not the time to pile on additional pressure on the ordinary Ghanaian because times are hard. It hasn't been easy. Difficult. It has been very difficult few years, and we think that policies must be as soon as possible introduced to reduce the suffering of the masses.
And quite a lot has been happening in the House, as we are pointing to you, with debates also going on in terms of what government economic plan will be for the communities ravaged by the spillage of the Akosombo Dam. All of these are coming up on the floor of the House. Kwaku Asante is our parliamentary correspondent, joining us with the latest of the details coming up. Kwaku, quite a busy day in Parliament today, starting off with what it is that the majority leader is indicating. And now we know that the energy minister has also appeared before the House, pointing out how much has been expended as a result of the spillage of the Akosombo Dam. Tell us more.
Well, in fact, that has taken months.
Kwaku, we seem to be having a challenge hearing you.
In fact, at some point, tempers flared up. There were MPs who had each other's neck and neck, literally fighting each other. There were some comments that had been made by the energy minister, and I'll see this as we bring you the feed in terms of what exactly is happening on the floor. But the energy minister had said that the DRA had done nothing, claims that the DRA had mismanaged the situation was clearly untrue. This is a situation the minority people, in particular, someone who could have black community.
Well, Kwaku Asante, we seem to be having a challenge hearing you, but of course on your screens now you see live pictures that we're getting from the House as that debate continues. Now we have our feed restored. Quite a heated debate it has been. Now the minority leadership, I see there, are making some contributions. Let's listen in.
Created by him. So they didn't make those comments politically. There were people who were affected. So, Mr. Speaker, that comment is, it's based on, pardon? No. It was only one person. So
address me. Ignore that.
So, I want you to rule him out and then ask him to withdraw that portion. Every comment was based on fact. None of the comment was made with ill motives. So he must withdraw that part of his comment.
Kindly assist me. Specifically, which one? The political, or which one is your complaint? So I want to be sure.
A comment that Honorable Ampem's comment was patriotic. Unlike others, it means that everything all colleagues have said this afternoon were not patriotic, Mr. Speaker. What can be more dangerous than calling a Ghanaian unpatriotic, Mr. Speaker? It's more serious than actually an insult, Mr. Speaker. I'm calling on him to withdraw that portion, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to know where the minority chief whip is resting his case. Because he just said that the deputy leader used the word political. That he said what others have said is political statement. What we deal with here, Mr. Speaker, is political. No, you said what he said. The member for Aswejaman has been patriotic. His own comments, unlike the others whose statements or comments were political What do we do here? What do we do here? So, Mr. Speaker, if really he heard right, what he said, that the interventions were political interventions, I don't see anything wrong with that. That's what he said. That is what you
said.
So what did I say?
I knew you got the meaning of what I said. Mr. Speaker, he made a comment and said, Honorable Ampem's presentation was patriotic, unlike others whose presentation were only political. Mr. Speaker, the qualification is patriotic, and I'm saying that every single member of this House is patriotic to the state. And the comments made by the colleagues were based on issues there here. I'm saying that, Mr. Speaker, no member of this House is unpatriotic. We took an oath to work as a true Ghanaian. So I'm saying that there cannot be a bigger imputation of the integrity of a member of parliament than to say he or she is not patriotic. Based on that, Mr. Speaker, the respected deputy leader must necessarily withdraw that part of his presentation and make progress.
Honorable Deputy Leader, we would like to reframe your presentation.
Mr. Speaker, it is obvious that he misunderstood the metaphoric effect of my statement.
You didn't hear what he said.
Yes. But it's fine. Since it's been misconstrued and it's become an issue, I would state it properly so that we can all make progress. Mr. Speaker, the effect of that metaphor in that submission was to draw the House's attention to the fact that the statement made by Honorable Thomas Nyako Ampem was most profound in my view. Most profound. The patriotism in his statement was most profound. And clearly he demonstrated same by commending the works of VRA. He said, it is not the first time VRA has done this spillage. VRA has been so successful in its work, and that VRA, we should rather look at enhancing the capacity of VRA. To me, that is where we find the meat, enhancing the capacity of VRA. He is coming from a constituency where VRA is situated. He knows the work of VRA. He is a witness to the work of VRA. Mr. Speaker, this is the first time. But the man is sitting here. Are you his advocate?
What you are praising?
I'm praising him. Are you jealous of the praises? Mr. Speaker?
Are you jealous of praising him?
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Thomas Nyako Ampem has highly commended the work of VRA. And the records will reflect, and posterity will have it, that when it came to a point where the work of VRA was misconstrued, he stood out.
Honorable Leader, hold on. Yes, Honorable Nyako Ampem. Mr. Speaker, in fact, I think that the Deputy Majority Leader has misconstrued the submission that I made. I have rather questioned the VRA capacity to implement some of these spillages effectively. And I have questioned the effectiveness of the EPP that they have been talking about. I have questioned that is it the case that the EPP actually anticipated or had planned that safe havens are classrooms and that this is how the EPP should be implemented. Mr. Speaker, I have done all this so to create the impression that I have come here to praise VRA only and to leave the salient part of my submission to create the impression that my colleagues, I have departed from what my colleagues have said is to try to knock our heads together. It's most unfortunate, and leader, don't put me into this awkward position. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
When my colleague was on his feet, I took down some notes. He said, quote, VRA is doing a good work. You acknowledge the good work being done by GRA, and indeed I agree with you. When you identify some inefficiencies, that is why you made a call that perhaps what we need as a country is to be looking at enhancing the capacity of VRA. And you took notes. That's what you said. And I'm saying that statement is very profound, commendable. Nobody in this chamber from your side has made such a statement. And I'm commending you. You are the only one acknowledging. Mr. Speaker, such a profound patriotic statement coming from the honorable member from Esojaman must be acknowledged, and I associate myself with that statement. I am inclined to accept that. This is a national call. This is what we need in this chamber. We don't need partisanship in all matters. This member has stood out. Today, posterity will record your good works. Honorable Akosombo, you have not been partisan. History will remember you. That you are acknowledging the good works of a state institution. You are calling for an inquiry that would enable VRA enhance its capacity. These are your words, and I commend you. I agree that there must be. It's a democratic imperative. If we don't institute inquiries into such matters, Mr. Speaker, we will not make any headway in our democracy. So I agree. By agreeing, we will be able to commend their hard work, such as he's doing. Mr. Speaker, again, an impression is being created as though the situation is limited to a particular constituency. Mr. Speaker, so far I must acknowledge that Northern constituency has been very visible for the optics. Mr. Speaker, if you see what is happening there, I think the industry of the Member of Parliament in bringing that to the fore has also contributed to that, and I agree. It is obvious that those affected there have also received a considerable amount of relief items. I think earlier on the submission created an impression that the Member of Parliament had personally, I think that was his contention. But I think that the language was misused. The language should have been that his constituents have benefited immensely, and they are still benefiting. The Minister of Finance is there, NADMO is there, the Energy Minister has been there. So, Mr. Speaker, anybody who would say, I have donated rice, I have donated cash, I am acknowledging the fact that I have personally not been there. But I have given money, I have given rice, I am still contributing. Because you know, part of me is from there. From some parts of the areas affected. Mr. Speaker, I won't mind you. Mr. Speaker, so nobody, for partisan reason, should say that the government has done nothing. The government has done something. We should say that it is not sufficient, and I would agree. It cannot be sufficient, because looking at the state of affairs, Anyako area alone, the people who have been affected in Anyako, yes, Mr. Speaker, Anyako people deserve some more. The people from Salaga South deserve some more. The people of Bupe area, some Winneba people are there in Bupe. They have been calling on me. Mr. Speaker, true, they have all been calling. I have a few people, they are doing fishing. Mr. Speaker, I know how they are suffering. But they have not been left naked. They have not. So nobody in this chamber should say that government has abandoned the people there. Nobody should read partisan political meaning into the conduct of government. It is never the case. The president himself was there. We are aware that others have been there.
Is this the president?
Mr. Speaker,
Is this the president?
Mr.
Is this the president?
Mr. Speaker, I said the president was there, but President Mahama was there. He didn't mention that one.
Honorable, you still have the floor. I haven't recognized you.
Especially the president.
Mr. Speaker, so I just want us to get the record straight that in such a situation, not only the government but the media, CTFM did so well and drew attention to the situation. Is it for me to talk about what your party has done? So, Mr. Speaker, let members of parliament whose constituents have benefited acknowledge what government has done. They shouldn't just acknowledge it on their social media handle. They should acknowledge it in this chamber. And this is a call I am making to members of parliament who have received donations. I don't mean personal donations, but donations received by them for and on behalf of their people. Norton, for example, has received a lot of support, not the MP personally. Norton has received support. And I want the record to reflect that when it got to this situation, the people of Norton were not left naked. The Methodist Church has been there. Only yesterday, the Methodist Church was in Norton. So, Mr. Speaker, I am calling on volunteers, corporate Ghana, and all institutions who have heard about this not to over-concentrate in one constituency. I am calling on corporate Ghana to look at the spread. A lot of constituencies have been affected.
Honorable Leader,
Mr. Speaker, I'm concluding.
conclude.
Sure. Mr. Speaker, I shall conclude on a matter of law as raised by the Honorable Dafiamepo in relying on Act 46, Section 11. Mr. Speaker, I most humbly and respectfully submit that the section he quoted, upon which he anchored the submission to chastise VRA, was wrong, completely wrong. Mr. Speaker, the law is clear. The water levels is not just the level that would have to be used to determine whether or not to spill, but is the flow. If you have the level correct and there is no rainfall, you don't spill. But, Mr. Speaker, if you see, even if it is lower, and you see what is coming, the volume is high, Mr. Speaker, you would have to take a decision. So, Mr. Speaker, for you, Mr. Speaker, for you to rely on the law, to mislead yourself, and by extension attempt to mislead us, Mr. Speaker, you have to be corrected. VRA, as Honorable Ampim said, may have some inefficiencies. I think that after this exercise, we should rather concentrate on looking at what we can do as a nation, so that in future, should such a thing happen, it will not get out of hand. And even look at where our people are located. Is it the case that they are so close to the areas that when there is spillage, they will be most affected? Then we educate our people. These are matters for consideration. Mr. Speaker, I most respectfully submit and thank you for this opportunity.
Leadership.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me thank the Minister for Energy for the statement. Let me stay on record that a lot of honorable members who were seriously affected wanted the opportunity to speak, but for time. Mr. Speaker, let me mention Honorable Woyome, who had really strongly wanted to speak. Southon, Honorable Member of Salaga wanted to speak, Honorable Member of Central Tong, Honorable Woteje wanted to speak. All of them really had a lot to say about this crisis. But Mr. Speaker, let me, in brief, talk about the minister's presentation. I think when we listened to the minister, he started off by really stating the VRA's competence and talked about their maintenance record, a history of spillage and how they handled it. He even quoted Libya and Norway and the fact that they've had spillage. He talked about VRA's emergency preparedness plan, processes they put in place and the procedures and the preventive actions they put in place. We talk about simulation exercises they had done. Mr. Speaker, all of his presentation was mainly on these areas. The question was, what was the aftermath of all this preparation? Today we have listened to members of parliament that clearly were not consulted, and a lot of them have said it personally. It is very clear that the minister in defending VRA's preparedness failed to really lay bare the gaps that we must revisit to ensure that there will not be a recurrence. What was the level of consultation? I remember in one part of the presentation, the minister said at one community engagement, there were 400 community members, chiefs. Mr. Speaker, in all of this preparation, what we want to see is that how was the outcome? How was all these preparatory exercises, all this, how was it implemented? If your country have an emergency preparedness plan, and in the aftermath of a disaster, we find ourselves where we are. We have failed. And that's the point people are making. Mr. Speaker, it should not get to a point where we have even disagreement about this crisis. And people who are representing the constituencies and the districts, who are speaking so emotionally, Mr. Speaker, must be understood. Because, Mr. Speaker, when I listen, for example, to Honorable Ablakwa, and he talked about NADMO's own report of 12,633 people displaced. Talked about almost 1,550 houses destroyed, 53 schools destroyed, and so many people living in schools. Mr. Speaker, this must be painful, your whole lifetime. Mr. Speaker, and they are talking about that because we've dealt with crisis. How did we handle, for example, the Apetu disaster? Mr. Speaker, how was it handled? The whole government set up a fund. I remember. We set up the Apetu disaster fund. As we speak, there's a housing scheme. Apieti. The corporate support was actually led by government's voice. And the point that members of parliament who have spoken today are saying is that that same level of commitment has not been seen in this crisis.
More people are affected during the flood.
Mr. Speaker, and that we should not disagree on. Mr. Speaker, so the question and the issue at stake is that VRA's emergency preparedness plan, how was it implemented? The simulation exercise, what was the outcome? We know, for example, that in the minister's statement, he says that VRA set up 10 million Ghana cedi aside. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about billions of Ghana cedi in terms of the cost. We are talking about farms, long term, in the next 20 years, how do we recover? So, Mr. Speaker, the issues we are dealing with were not addressed, frankly, by the minister. They were not addressed. Mr. Speaker, the minister's statement really created gas. For example, what steps, I wanted to listen to the minister to see what steps have been put in place to ensure that we don't really face this disaster. And when it happens, the so-called emergency preparedness plan will address this crisis differently. That we will not see thousands of people living in classrooms as they are right now. That school children will find themselves so miserable. Mr. Speaker, this is why we are in this point of crisis. It is very important we address that. But Mr. Speaker, we have to also talk about government's own response. Government's own response. The executive arm of the Republic of State, led by President Akosombo, who set up a 13-member ministerial committee. Mr. Speaker, what is their report? And what are their recommendations? What steps have been taken? When Sierra Leone gets a crisis and the Vice President is sent and he donates $1 million, that level of crisis in Sierra Leone wasn't anything close to what happened here. How much do we give the people in the affected areas when the Vice President visits? That is the concern. That is the worry. That is the pain that people are expressing. How do we deal with this going forward? Mr. Speaker, people have asked government, call for a national emergency. That call never came. The asked government, set up a fund to deal with it. That's nothing. What is even the plan to really, in the short term, resettle people? What is the plan? So, Mr. Speaker, to make it very brief, it is very clear. We thank the Minister for Energy for the presentation, but the presentation failed to address serious gaps. First, VRA has too much questions to answer. There are gaps in terms of when the decision was made to spill. And Mr. Speaker, the Minister himself admitted that we are getting clear signals, contradictory signals from international weather authorities as against our own local authorities. Contradictory projections. We in Parliament must understand what this happened, because you know what? We want to make sure that when this happens again, we will not find ourselves wanting like we are. There should be no disagreement about how we deal with Ghanaians who are suffering. There shouldn't be, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, number one, we believe, and I believe that, Mr. Speaker, you support us. I saw that the Deputy Majority Leader supports us. We are calling for a full-blown parliamentary inquiry to deal with all the gaps that I've raised, to make sure we can ask the pertinent questions. Mr. Speaker, the reasons are very clear. One, we have to understand VRA's decisions and understand the failures in terms of the emergency preparedness plan, in terms of all the stimulation exercise, in terms of even their community engagement. How come the community engagement left so many critical stakeholders in that engagement? It's very clear. We must make sure that doesn't happen again. Mr. Speaker, it is very, very clear we have a disaster on our hands. And let me take the opportunity to call on the government led by President Akosombo. We are expecting to see a very aggressive and serious solution in this budget that is being presented. To see that this government seriously is going to address that. Put their money where their mouth is. In this budget, we must see that there are serious efforts to really help resettle people. Make sure school children can go back to school. Make sure that people who have lost millions in farms, lifetime savings, will have some assurance that there will be recovery and hope. That's what government is about. If government cannot lead us in the direction of recovery in times of crisis, then what is the point? So, Mr. Speaker, I believe you will support a full-blown inquiry into this very important matter. And let me use the opportunity to again console our brothers and sisters who have been affected, all the way from the Volta, all the way to the Oti region along the coast. Let me thank Corporate Ghana and ask that we can do more, that they should support. Let me thank political actors, especially President Mahama, who was the first to be there. The first to be there. And his compassion. He didn't only donate. He moved heaven and earth to ask corporate entities to move. More than that, he personally donated. And private, and I don't want to mention names, but sometimes you have to. Ibrahim Mahama has done something very fantastic. And we must commend him. That's what we want Ghanaians to do. He has convinced me that it is worth supporting people to really go up the ladder, because when in times of crisis, those are the type of people we need. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that you support our call for a full-blown parliamentary investigation to make sure we can ask the right questions, and the purpose is not witch hunting at all, to make sure we can ensure that as a country we will not see this again, and that when it happens we will be ready. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to the statement. Speaker, a statement ably made by the Minister responsible for energy. Speaker, dealing with the circumstances that led to the spillage of impounded water, I believe the time has come for all of us to look at the management of the entire river basin, the entire Bhutan basin. Speaker, that's the first thing that should concern us. My colleague, the Honorable Dafiamapo, related to the levels of the water in December 2022. And I think his attitude was that maybe the spillage ought to have started from then on. And we all do know that December, January, February are lean months in terms of rains. If you do spill, the consequences could be bizarre. Mr. Speaker, it is the reason why you have to basically rely on information from the Meteo department. Even that is not sacrosanct. Remember what happened in 2010, when, upon predictions from the meteorological department, spillage was affected. People don't even connect the ensuing doomsday late 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014 to the spillage that occurred. We failed to connect it. That indeed was the principal source of the doomsday that afflicted this country. That's why you need to watch the radar to see whether or not to spill off or not to spill off. But the point is, did we all perhaps go to sleep a bit? Because as the Dr. Kwabena Donko alluded to, we have had continuously over the past 2.5 years above average rainfall in this country. Since 2021, we have had above average rainfall, which is why even after the rainy season, the waters in the streams don't recede to the earlier points. If we go to sleep a bit, because we are talking as members of parliament, we are aware of all these things. We didn't make any reports. Did the assemblies make any reports? All this while, when we saw things that were not familiar scenes. So let's not be quick in apportioning blame. Mr. Speaker, the VRA began their controlled spillage at Akosombo and Pong on the 15th of September, we are told. And unfortunately, an estimated 27,000 people, as of the end of October, we're told, have been displaced. Certainly not the best for us as a country. Speaker, since the construction of the dam, we are told that perhaps this is the largest magnitude of displacement and the largest spillage of impounded water recorded. But in May 2023, prior to the spillage, the VRA, we must admit, because when the first statement came to be made in the House, it was stated here that no simulation had been done.
Yes.
It was stated in the House. Now, subsequently, we've heard that indeed some simulation was done that involved over 10,000 people in Sujaman, in Adan East, and North Tomu districts in the eastern Greater Accra and Volta regions. Was it enough? The Speaker, VRA initially had planned, according to information reaching me, they had planned to do the spillage in October. But technical observations and meteo warnings compelled them to bring it forward to the 15th, because it was indicated to them that if they waited beyond September 15th, something much more disastrous was going to happen. And if they had waited maybe 2-3 days later, we never could predict what could have happened to this country. So unfortunate the circumstances have turned out to be, VRA cannot be blamed. Mr. Speaker, for VRA, they've done regular inspections, and these inspections have resulted in several retrofits over the years. I remember from President Kufuor's time when they did serious retrofitting. Of course, the retrofitting would involve upgrading of electrical and control systems, the replacing of turbines and generators, and even upgrading the dam spillway gates. If those things have not been done, Mr. Speaker, and these things were happening today, perhaps the gates themselves would have given in. And that's why we should commend VRA for what they've been doing all this while. Mr. Speaker, they have also strengthened the dam's concrete structures. And I'm informed that the retrofitting that they've done the past few years have resulted in a situation where the life of the dam has now been extended for about 40 years. So we must be commending them. But after all, they are also a human institution. They could get it wrong sometimes. Mr. Speaker, the outcome of the spillage has been inconvenient and indeed very unpleasant. But as I said, it could have been worse. We allude to houses that have been lost. Imagine somebody having saved his entire life, his entire working life, built a house, and overnight it's washed away. Nothing would hit heart and soul than this. Monies have been lost. Farms have been stripped off. Harvests, farm produces have been lost. Livestock. The good thing for us is that lives have not been lost. And if VRA had not done their work, if the spillage had not been controlled, can anybody envisage what would have happened? Mr. Speaker, whilst we are this, we should also question ourselves what we've been doing all these years. The level of deforestation, of the vegetation surrounding the streams and rivers, which is causing serious erosion and siltation of the lake. So we must be blaming ourselves as well as Ghanaians. Mr. Speaker, so with the siltation, the massive siltation, any less downpour, of course, will cause serious flooding. And it's one of the things that we are seeing. As I said, perhaps all of us went to sleep. There should be an inquiry, we do agree. Mr. Speaker, maybe the time has come for us. And I was across the divide. I was having a private discussion with the minority chief whip. And I was asking, his own private house, is it insured? I'm not too sure that he can respond in the positive. In New York, when they had this serious flooding, the aftermath may not be as punishing as what we're having in Ghana. Our houses are not insured. I'm not too sure whether the house of the Honorable Minister responsible for energy himself is insured.
No comment.
He says no comment. Mr. Speaker, perhaps these things should remind us, painfully as it may be, to begin to do serious insurance. Insurance schemes for our houses, insurance schemes for our farms, for even our livestock. This should trigger it, unfortunate as the situation is. Mr. Speaker, the health implications cannot be lost on us. The water that we are drinking, now that they have inundated cemeteries and public toilets, upon some attempts we made to clean up, but how wholesome is the water that is running through our pipes now? We must be prepared for some health emergencies. And those are serious. They could affect greater sections of the population than even what has happened. Mr. Speaker, so this should lead us into some serious considerations. Apart from the health implications, inflation in this country is fueled primarily by food inflation. And we're preparing ourselves for good harvest. Now this happens. The whole basin. Mr. Speaker, so our own food security perhaps may be affected negatively. And that certainly then is not going to help us to cure inflation, because a lot of it is predicated on high food prices, on food inflation. So there are many things that should really emanate from the spillage and the flooding upstream. Mr. Speaker, I want to end once again by commending the Minister for bringing the statement to the House and providing some illumination going forward. What do we do as a country? I believe we'll be borne out from the report of the Interministerial Committee, and if we are minded to go on our own leg of establishing the parliamentary committee to delve further into that, I believe the House should be ready for that. Having said so, Mr. Speaker, I believe, as I stated initially, that this is just a brief to the House. We have invited DRA and other units and departments connected with this, including the Ministry of Health and Science Environment, to come to this House. Perhaps because of the pendency of the budget, maybe we could decide to let them come and do the presentation to us on Tuesday before the budget, because once the budget comes to be presented, Mr. Speaker, it will take center stage and will not perhaps find time to deal with this matter. So I would, subject to the indulgence of colleagues, Mr. Speaker, with your approval, I would request that we bring their appearance forward to Tuesday to enable the relevant ministers to come and do the presentation before the joint caucus on Tuesday following. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity.
Before I invite the Honourable Minister, Honourable Leader, I want to be clear what is it you're talking about, VRA doing presentation. I've heard two things, that a parliamentary inquiry, and then at the same time you're saying VRA should do a presentation. What is it about?
Mr. Speaker, I think the call for the parliamentary inquiry ensued from the composite statement that was made. Perhaps if VRA comes before us to make the presentation on Tuesday, it may cure that. But if further to that, we still want to go on that leg, we could. But the parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Speaker, we should be minded that once the budget comes, it may be difficult to go on that. So let them come and do the presentation to us on Tuesday. And if you are still purpose and minded to go on that, we can set up the committee, except that the committee could only work seriously once Parliament adjourns. That is post December 22nd, 2023.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with Leader. I think we all have come to a point where we agree that indeed, even the government set up a committee looking into it. On our own terms, we can also look into it. So, Mr. Speaker, instead of waiting for VR, indeed, the Minister's presentation suggested that other agencies not under his purview, Meteorological Service are not under him. So when we set up the parliamentary committee, then we can call upon others. The idea is to prevent this happening to us again in this form. The flooding will have to take place another year, but the effect. So it is not a witch hunt committee, it's just to make sure we plan for the future. So we can set up the committee. They don't need to report before we go on recess in December. We can set up the committee and take time to work. In any case, the processing, in fact, the waters are now receding. It is posing new threats, health threats and other things. So the committee can be given a considerable amount of time to work and come up with something that we can use with the Speaker. So we can go ahead and set up the committee. In fact, we don't need to even name the members today. We can take time to constitute that.
I'm looking at the committees of the House. I've looked at select committees. If it's not a select committee, then it should be a special or ad hoc committee under Order 191. So let the leaders confer. If it's under 191, then I think the procedure is a bit different, and I want to be guided. Yes, Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of our onerous duties is to come to the House and give the House as much information as possible to enable members to also, in their own ways, either disseminate or get informed about issues. Mr. Speaker, I would like to put on record that it is never true that there is a point mark for VRA to spill. What is true is that there's a point mark for the dam integrity, which VRA works towards, not breaking that point mark. You can be below that point mark and still spill, like the Honourable Afenyo Markin said, because of the volumes of water that are coming. I can just say, Mr. Sabo, with one example. In 2010, there was a spillage in the dam for about a few days. Mr. Speaker, after they stopped closing the spill, because the rains have stopped